This is the 88th episode of the Effective Executive podcast and YouTube channel. And this week I wanted to talk about two sources of costs and customer frustration that I see in almost every organization. And these things really manifest themselves in phone calls or some type of communication, but typically a phone call. And whenever you get a call from a customer, unless they're placing an order, it's going to cost you money because somebody's got to spend time to listen to the issue and fix the problem and all the things. And so there's huge amounts of waste in large organizations, especially, but even in small organizations. And some small organizations just ignore them. And obviously then that leads to increased customer dissatisfaction. Because think about it. I mean, if a customer has to pick up a phone call for something they don't understand or something you did wrong or miscommunicated to them, then this is going to affect your business, and then marketing has to work harder and sales has to work harder, and on and on. And the costs just increase exponentially. So people use the word do it right the first time. Yeah. But most often executives don't know what doing it right the first time should look like, and they really should. So here are the two things. Here are the two sources of costs I see and customer frustration I see in every organization. And whichever is first or second doesn't really matter. My experience has been sometimes it's the first thing and sometimes it's the second thing, but these two definitely will be at the top of the list. So the first one that I wrote down was billing. It can be wrong billing. Wasn't what the customer expected. They didn't understand the bill. And these are things that contact center reps picking up a phone call or even a customer service, they can't fix. Typically, they can't fix these by themselves. Now, if you're a small company and there's only two people in the organization, it's done fairly quickly. But contact center agents have a purview, and because they're often viewed as somewhat less of an employee than others, they aren't allowed to get into the financial areas of the organization and put a fix in billing. What do they have to do? They have to communicate it somehow to the finance area, and the finance area then puts it in a queue, and these things fall through the cracks so often. It's mind-boggling to me that organizations don't pay more attention to this, and this is such a problem that the cost increase, the customer frustration is huge. But people just move on. Well, our IT system spits out a bill, and if the customer doesn't understand it, well, we'll show them how, but that costs you money too. Things need to be simplified and clear to customers, and should meet what you told them things would cost when you first signed them up. And sometimes that's ignored because guess what? Salespeople they want to get the sale and then they want to move on to something else, not the follow-on things that will ultimately cost you money to fix with customers and lose your customers in the long term. The second thing is just communications. And, we might put that into the category. There's some, again, a Venn diagram. There's some crossover of these things. The communication could be considered, billing could be a communication, but usually I'm talking about communication about what the customer thought they were getting when they talked to the sales person, or a promise made on the phone, or you told me, last year that you were going to put pre-emergent on my lawn, and it didn't happen. And this year, I was expecting that you would, and you didn't, and you lose business. Customer gets frustrated. But they also come in the form of things like a mailer that goes out. I've seen multiple situations in organizations where, a mailer will go out to a customer or a potential customer. And, if it's a potential customer, it's not so bad because then they're calling up and you're giving you an opportunity to have a conversation with them. But sometimes those mailers also go to existing customers, right? And then there's the fine text in there. It basically says, oh, you get it. We'll give you this deal for $50 a month. And, you're paying as a current customer $150 a month. And you're like, call them up and say, hey, well, that's only for new customers. you know, you're probably going to get a phone call or a cancellation. And the other things are push text. So, for instance, just this week, I was dealing with Xfinity, and I got a text from them, and they said, hey, you may have equipment that needs to be sent back. And so there was a link. I clicked on the link, and it sent me to a page, and it basically said, please return these items. And there was no item on the page that I was linked to. So now I've got to call and figure out, okay, are you showing I haven't returned equipment? And you always keep your receipts for these things because it's, in large organizations, these things get lost. But anyway, they bring up more questions, when you get these push texts, from people. Sometimes they're sales things, and that's fine. You want to upgrade your phone or, upgrade the types of service that you have, number of channels you have. It can be any of a number of things, but sometimes you get push texts that you're like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with this. And so you pick up the phone call and have to call. Costs increase. Now I've had to spend time on it. And sometimes you spend an inordinate amount of time as a customer having to deal with these things. And I don't know why it is, but whenever I talk to a lot of executives about these things, they just don't equate that to cost. Well, that's the cost of doing business. Well, no, it isn't. If you can make your system not send out things that people don't understand, or sometimes they're just spit out by the IT system. They need to be addressed. Other things that you get with regards to communication. Sometimes someone was expecting to get a call back or an email or a text or something from someone about the next thing that's going to happen, whether it's scheduling something or kind of just keeping customers in the loop. But when you don't meet their expectations, they'll typically pick up the phone call and say, hey, we agreed to do this service, but, when are you coming out? Because I haven't heard from you. And then as opposed to just showing up. And sometimes that happens too. So it depends on the types of businesses you are. But again, billing and communications are two of the worst that I see in every organization. It's the first two places I go. If I'm going into an organization or I talk to an executive about how much they know what's happening in those interactions between customers and their organization. And I am baffled that executives don't spend that time. In a larger company, the more gap there is. In other words, if you're a senior vice president or executive vice president, you got all these layers between you and where the frontline folks are interacting with customers. And to fix these things, they typically require executive involvement in a traditionally designed organization. Why? Well, if you look at billing, as I mentioned before, in billing, contact center agent typically is a part of the finance area. And like I said, they throw it over the wall and hope that it gets fixed. And if it isn't done timely, then they're going to be getting a phone call from the customer, or if it's done wrong or whatever. And what I find is, the finance area in a high percentage of organizations is a walled off area, and you can't touch their thing because, we can't trust you as an employee. And people are worried about why they're aren't able to keep employees in their organization. Well, this is why. The second thing, or the another thing that that requires executive involvement is, you know, communications also are cross-functional. Marketing department may be putting these things out, or a IT automated message, or whatever. And so a lot of executives get out of touch with what's happening in their organization. You should be getting these communications from your ID department or your marketing departments to make sure that the things that you're getting are, you know, easily understood. But these are almost hidden costs in organizations that executives just overlook because they're busy, you know, thinking big picture, or looking at the numbers or whatever it is. And they can be mesmerizing, I know, but where you need to be spending your time, at least 10% of your time, is listening to those interactions. It doesn't matter. There's interactions between customer and the front line, and it doesn't matter whether you're in finance or marketing or whatever, but understanding those things and how your communications or your billing affects a particular customer. And so because these things are cross-functional, that's why an executive typically has to get involved. Now, the good news is most organizations that I've worked with, we design this stuff out. There's a permanent fix, and it's a redesign. In other words, it may require that the contact center agent can get into the system to fix the problem right then. And, you know, oh no, we could never, oh, chaos would ensue. Well, it never does. The expectation, you know, or somebody's going to steal money from the company. Well, that should have been taken care of in hiring, I guess. But employees typically, they just want to resolve the issue for the customer, and you know, then they move on to the next call. But it's not permanently fixed until the billing is fixed, and so forth. And that often, as I said, requires a redesign. And once you do redesign customer in, then you don't have these issues on the scale that you do. And as they creep in, if a contact center agent or a frontline person that's dealing with a customer has the ability to actually solve the problem, then you're going to have more engaged employees, because there's a certain satisfaction associated with actually fixing something for a customer as opposed to passing it over the wall. So anyway, that's what I wanted to communicate this week. These are two huge sources. Doesn't matter what the organization's seen them over and over again. And just keep in mind, there's always a better way. Catch you next week.